welcome back to my channel. September is over and I'm in a bit of a shock that we're in fall, which means winter is basically here, at least in Maine. September was a good reading month for me. It was solid, probably my most productive month of this year so far. I started September with The Year of the Flood by Margaret Atwood. This is the second book in the MaddAddam trilogy, the first being Oryx and Crake, which I read about 2 years ago. The series is a post-end of the world story after a virus has killed off the human population. The first book follows Snowman, a survivor going between his present, where he is trying to survive, and his only companions are a genetically modified humanoid race called the Quakers, and his past growing up in a futuristic version of our world, if our world were to become dominated and ruled by corporations. Since The Year of the Flood is the second book, I don't want to say too much or else I'll get into spoilers, but I will be posting a review of this soon. What I will say is I loved this book. It was so good. Please read the series. It was amazing. After that, I read a couple of Neil Gaiman's Snow White retellings. When I was looking for The Sleeper and the Spindle at the bookstore, I found Snow Glass Apples first, so I ended up picking them both up. I thought it would be interesting to read two different retellings from the same author. They are very different, though. First off, The Sleeper and the Spindle is an illustrated short story and is about Snow White rescuing Sleeping Beauty. Although I don't think Gaiman ever directly refers to the main character as Snow White, it was a nice story with an interesting twist at the end, and Gaiman does a good job of highlighting how strong Snow White's character is in this story. Now, Snow Glass Apples is very different. This is a comic book from the perspective of Snow White's stepmother, and in this story, Snow White isn't some strong, innocent, empowering heroine. No, Snow White is the thing that keeps you up at night, the monster under your bed. This story is chilling and I loved it. I also really appreciated the different art style in it. It's not something you often see and I think it fit really well with this story. After that, I read Wild Seed by Octavia Butler. This book is about two immortals that cross paths and the conflict that ensues from their very different moral values. This book took me a little bit to get into it, partially because I had a very different picture in my head of what this book was about, but once I got into it, I chewed it up. I don't know how, but I finished it in a day. I thought the characters were interesting and the premise was unique. I'm not sure if I'm interested in the other books in the series, but there are other books of Butler's that I'm really interested in, like Fledgling. I just haven't been able to get my hands on it. After that, I picked up Catastrophe by Dino, which is a collection of short stories, most of them very, very short. Buzzati was a famous Italian novelist, and this collection is translated from Italian. It took me a little longer to get through this collection than pretty much everything else this month because I could not binge it. These stories were so disturbing and unsettling, and I had to pace myself while reading them because of that. I made the mistake of reading one during my lunch break at work, and it was probably the worst possible story to read at that moment. I was already having an off day, and I was going to be working with people, answering random questions, general customer service stuff after my lunch break. Of course, I read a story about this exhausted couple that just got off a train and they are trying to find a hotel to stay at so they can get some much needed rest. But all the hotels are full, apparently, even though they can't see any cars in the parking lots. And the people around the town are looking at them funny and are just being generally rude to the point where they are just absolutely terrible to this poor, exhausted couple. And I couldn't help feeling like the exhausted couple that was about to be bombarded with mud and insults from the general public. Not that that was actually going to happen, but it definitely didn't put me in a good working spirit mood. This would actually be a good read for this time of year if you want some disturbing stories for October, but maybe not if you are depressed. After that, I read MaddAddam, the third book in the MaddAddam trilogy. In the beginning, I felt a little off. I was trying to figure out what I was reading towards, you know? I knew what I was waiting for in the other books, how the story would get from point A to point B. But with the third book, it took me a little bit longer to figure out what the goal was. But that passed, and I enjoyed this book nearly as much as I enjoyed the second book. Something I realized with Atwood's writing, and she does it so well, is that she can shift perspective so easily in the middle of a page, or even in a paragraph, going from present to flashback, from internal dialogue to external dialogue in the present, shifting back to flashback, and it's also fluid. Plus the different ways she is telling the story through flashbacks, through one-sided conversations, through the eyes of different characters is so interesting and entertaining, even when she is dealing with heavy subjects. This is one of those stories that I want everyone to read because it is so good. After that, I picked up the first volume of the manga Goodnight, Poonpoon. This isn't something I would normally pick up, not being much into slice of life, but it's a unique enough telling of a story that I still found it interesting. Goodnight, Punpun is about a young boy who has lots of dreams, his family has lots of problems, and he has a child's view of how the world works. He's a growing child and experiencing a lot of things for the first time. The artist draws Punpun and his family like these little ghost characters, and they stand out from the rest of the normal looking characters in the book, but they aren't treated any differently, as if the readers, us, are the only ones who see them as different. There were some other weird moments in this book. The adults were strange and kind of terrifying in their actions and emotions and their expressions at times. And I think that might be a reflection of how Punpun views adults, maybe, or it's something different. I am curious to see where it goes from here, but it's probably a series that will take me a long time to get through. The last weekend of September, I finished the poetry collection I started a couple weeks ago, Depression and Other Magic Tricks. I liked it. Some of the combinations of words and images fit together really well. I thought it was going to be more generally about depression, maybe depression in everyday life, but it's mostly about lost love, unrequited love, and the Stacy from about 8 years ago would probably have eaten this up and cried and then written poetry of her own. She did that old Stacy, but it was very bad with lots of profanity. There were some moments that still hit though as I was reading it. It's been a long time since I read poetry, so it was nice to read something and feel like I could connect with it. I feel a little bit more inclined to try some more, although I still find poetry to be a little intimidating. In between reading the poetry collection, I was also reading The Dark Tide by Alicia Jasinska. I enjoyed reading this book, and it had a very strong start. There were a lot of good things about this book, but I did feel it lacked in some areas. Like I said, it had a strong start. It introduced an interesting setting. The book takes place on a magical enchanted island that is threatened with flooding every year, and every year the Witch Queen subdues the tide with a human sacrifice. The watery and magical island is so interesting, and the witches and magic that weave through it are so cool. I also really liked the two main characters, the Witch Queen and Lena, a girl who lives on the island and is trying to save her brother as well as the boy she loves from becoming victims of this annual sacrifice. They are both interesting characters and complicated, and they're strong in their own ways. I also really liked the writing style. What the author wrote was written well. Now, what I have an issue with is how the story was told. I think that the characters could have been a little more naturally fleshed out, perhaps by starting the story at an earlier point so we could get to know them a little better. A lot of the characters' characteristics and feelings and flaws are told to us rather than just letting us understand it on our own through their actions. There was a lot of internal questioning, which I don't generally like because too many thoughts posed as questions get in the way of experiencing the story more naturally, I think. It also felt rushed. I think we could have spent more time in certain parts of the story, and I certainly wanted to spend more time in certain parts of the story. I feel like it could have been so much better if it had been a bit longer and we had spent more time on fleshing out the characters and letting us sit with them and have them interact with each other, because that's what I really wanted. I wanted to sit with these really interesting characters. I liked the book, and I'm not sure, but I might pick up the second book if there is one. I'm not sure if there's going to be a second one, but I have a feeling that there will be. The last book I finished in September was The Starless C by Erin Morgenstern. I listened to the audiobook, and I've been listening to the audiobook for a very long time now. When I started it several months ago, I didn't fall in love with it because the narrator for the main character storyline didn't fit with how I pictured the main character to be. However, once I gave it a second chance, I really got into the story. I actually like the variety of narrators there are in this book, and I think it fits well with the magical library setting to have so many different storytellers. The interweaving of the stories is so interesting, and I really want to pick up a physical copy of this book so that I can reread it and see all the connections that I missed and pick up on the details that I didn't notice while listening to it. I still feel unsure about the ending. There are parts that I like, and there are parts that I think feel unfinished. I'm still stewing on it, but this is definitely one that I want to reread in the future. That's everything I read and listened to in the month of September. It was quite a variety, actually. I read 4 books, listened to an audiobook, read a comic, an illustrated short story, a collection of short stories, a poetry collection, and a manga. I feel pretty good about this month, and I hope this continues into October. Do you like to mix up the format of the stories that you read, or do you usually stick to one format, like physical books or comic books? I find mixing it up keeps me from getting into a reading slump. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more, please subscribe and hit the bell if you want to be notified when I post next. Have a great day. Bye.